was really young, right around 7 years old, I remember having a friend in the neighborhood that would occasionally come over to our house. I don't know how I met him, and he didn't go to my school, but he must have lived near us. I also remember him having some kind of vision problem or partial blindness because he wore large prescription glasses that were dark like sunglasses. One of the few clear memories I have of him was on a night around Christmas. My dad had brought this old tape deck and a microphone into my room and wanted me to record myself singing Christmas songs. He showed me how to use it and where to hold the mic, then left me alone to sing. I used to run around singing through the house all the time at that age, and my parents wanted to get a good recording of it while I was still young. Not long after I started recording, my friend came over and sat with me while I went through all of my Christmas songs. I can still clearly picture him sitting on the floor in my room and talking to me while I sang my songs. I don't really remember much more about him beyond the little snippets I have of playing together in my room, but at some point he just stopped coming over and life went on. I got older and my memories of this friend faded more and more until I really didn't think about him. He was just one of many childhood friends that came and went. Down the road, when I finished high school, my parents bought me a used '92 Honda Accord as a graduation present. It was 10 years old when I got it, but it had been a one-owner car and was in perfect condition. It hadn't been ruined by someone trying to turn it into a wannabe race car like so many other Hondas at that time. I loved that car and took incredible care of it. I left it completely stock and it still had the original tape deck in it, which I never wanted to swap out for a newer CD player. I was perfectly happy playing any tapes I could find. A few years after high school, when I was about 22, I was over at my parents' house helping them get ready for a garage sale and found a pretty big box filled with their old cassette tapes. It was a very eclectic mix, but a treasure trove of music, and I thought I'd take some to keep in my car. I know I grabbed my mom's Bonnie Raitt and John Denver, along with my dad's Scorpions and Eagles, because I still have those tapes stashed away somewhere today. Also in the box was a loose tape with a handwritten label that said Craig Christmas on it. My name is Craig, by the way, since I haven't mentioned that. I remembered it was the tape of me singing Christmas songs, so I grabbed that too, thinking it would be funny to listen to, and I threw the whole collection into the center console of my car. I didn't get to the Christmas tape for a few weeks, but when I finally put it in, the first thing I heard was my dad's voice. I could hear him telling me how to record. Then he did a little introduction and said it was me singing Christmas songs 1991 and finished by telling me to have fun. After he had left the room, it went to me. I was high energy, talking way too loudly into the mic and singing off key. Everything you'd expect from a little kid with a microphone. But part of the way through the tape, I heard myself talking to someone else. It was hard to tell with such an old and low-quality recording, but I swore I could hear a second voice in the background. Then it dawned on me I must have been talking to my friend who had shown up while I was singing. It could have been the old tape, but the second voice I was hearing didn't sound normal. It was shaky and almost distorted, and it sounded like it came from someone who had something wrong with their voice. It was very hard to hear, but I remember thinking maybe the poor kid also had some sort of speech impediment. I knew he had had issues with his eyes, but had no memory of his voice sounding different. When I thought back on it as an adult, I felt really bad for him and started to wonder where he went or whatever happened to him. I finished the rest of the Christmas tape, which was just me singing until the end, and the other side of the tape was blank. The same day I listened to that tape, I ended up calling my mom because I was curious about this old friend. I really just wanted to pick her brain about who he was and if she remembered him having these handicaps. I told her I listened to the Christmas tape and I had heard the two of us talking to each other. Then she stopped me when I said that and asked what friend I was talking about. I had to remind her that it was the partially blind friend who used to come over and the one who wore dark corrective glasses. I was sure she would remember him because he was so much different than any other friend I had. Not to mention I remembered her talking about his glasses when I was young. My mom kind of paused for a second, then told me very matter-of-factly that I never had a friend like that. No friend ever came over that was blind or wore dark glasses. She definitely remembered my dad helping me record the Christmas tape, but said I had been alone when that happened. Then she brought up something else that I had never heard before, and I think we were both equally surprised when we talked about this. She said that I used to talk about a boy who would show up in my room at night and play with me, and even though they let me go with it for a while, this friend didn't exist. They had conversations with me about it back then because they couldn't figure out why I'd made up a friend like that, but according to my mom, none of it was real. I really thought she had her memories of my friends mixed up because I could picture him and I had no doubt he was a real person. We went back and forth, almost arguing about it, but she insisted that the friend I was talking about was something I had made up between the ages of 5 and 7. The only reason I even thought he was blind was because of something my mom said when they asked about him. When I was young and said he always had big sunglasses on, she had made a comment about him being blind, but that was just to agree with me and make me talk more about him. I guess I had taken her comment and just ran with it. She said they never would have let one of my friends come over late at night like that, and when I thought about it rationally, I knew she was right. I don't know why I hadn't questioned that. This was hard for me to accept because I still remembered him, not as a made-up character, but as an actual physical friend. I could still picture him sitting on my bedroom floor with me, and I remembered us playing games and doing things together. It didn't feel like make-believe, it felt like actual events that happened. I did make my parents listen to the tape in my car and played that specific part where I was hearing a second voice. Both of them claim they can't hear it. My mom thinks I'm hearing one of my games in the background, and my dad doesn't hear anything but background voices from outside my room. To them, there is no second voice on the tape. When I listen to the tape, I get where my parents are coming from because it's not very clear, but I still hear it, and I don't think I can unhear it. I also can't stop myself from remembering him as a real person. For a long time, I didn't know what to think. I would go back and forth between believing my parents and believing my own memory. After a while, I kind of let it go because there was no way to prove anything either way. Probably 5 years after this, my girlfriend and I were in bed watching a show about abduction stories. I was only half paying attention until they started talking about something called screen memories. Basically, they described it as a false memory that can happen when a person experiences a traumatic event and their brain just doesn't know how to process it. A screen memory replaces the real memory with something familiar or harmless so the person can deal with what happened. The minute I heard this theory, I related it to the friend I'd had, and all kinds of questions came into my head. Like, why would he show up in my room at night, and why was he always wearing large sunglasses? Picturing him sitting in my room seemed so out of place and uncomfortable when I thought about it. That TV show freaked me out to the point of having an actual anxiety attack. In real time, I could feel myself realizing I had not been remembering a neighborhood kid in my bedroom. It was something else. I was also realizing that the dark glasses he wore weren't sunglasses. I got a whole new mental image of him, and all I could picture was this horribly disturbing, child-sized alien in my room with me. I now believe my parents completely. They would have remembered another child coming over at night, and I know they're not lying about that. They still believe I had a harmless imaginary friend and grew out of it because I've yet to tell them what I really think it was. I haven't wanted to say anything because I don't see them accepting something like that. I feel like I was being contacted during those 2 years of my life between ages 5 and 7, and my mind changed things to make it seem like I was with a friend. I also think the large sunglasses were either real and covering something that might have been difficult for me to see, or my mind was creating them to avoid seeing its real eyes. Back in 1988, I lived with my parents in Sharon Hill, Pennsylvania, which is a suburb right outside of Philadelphia. I was 5 years old then, and for a birthday present that year, I got one of those cool kids' tents that attaches to the top of your bed. Mine was a race car themed tent with a big number 8 on the side, and I absolutely loved it. I remember being so excited, and as a kid, I loved anything like that. I would play in refrigerator and appliance boxes and whatever else my family had that was similar to a tent or a fort. I don't know if all the bed tents had this, but the race car version had screens as the windows of the car that you could zip down and open if you wanted to. One night while I was sleeping in the tent, I had what I thought was a bad dream about bugs. My mom says she heard me scream for her in the middle of the night because I thought there were huge bugs in my room. Naturally, she thought there was a spider or some other kind of bug in my bed, but she never found anything. I woke up screaming like this many times, saying the exact same thing until they eventually took the tent off my bed, and I remember being really upset about that. I think they hoped it would help with the nightmares I was having and also make it easier to find any real bugs if there were any. That experience, as short as it was, traumatized me and gave me a lifelong problem with insomnia. I had such a hard time falling asleep afterward, and it's still something I have to deal with. I remember years of closing my eyes as tightly as I could and trying to fall asleep, but instead of sleeping, I would get these visions of constellations. I could see clusters of stars and lights, all of which were different colors, and they would be exploding and imploding around me. These visions were so intense as a child that I would have to open my eyes and physically shake my head to make them go away. It was a serious problem and it really bothered me. Migraine headaches came into my life at that young age as well, which seems like a strange coincidence. I don't know why they would have just shown up like that with everything else I had been experiencing, but those two have never gone away. I still have to deal with them as an adult. Years after all of this happened, I remember being in our local video rental store and I noticed the cover art on one of the VHS movies. This happened to be the movie Communion with Christopher Walken, and it had a picture of a gray alien's face right on the front. I can't describe how much this picture freaked me out, and not just because it was meant to be scary, but because the face looked so familiar to me. It affected me so much that I quit walking down that aisle of the store anytime we were renting movies. That was also the first time I remember seeing a gray alien like that. These days they're everywhere because shows like The X-Files and Ancient Aliens have popularized them for decades, but back then I don't remember seeing one until that moment in the video store. There's really no reason it should have scared me as much as it did, but I was petrified of that face. Many years later, around 2017, I was listening to an episode of Coast to Coast while in my car because I had long drives to visit my girlfriend, who is now my wife. During that particular show, one of the guests said he was from Yeadon, Pennsylvania, which is right next to where I lived outside of Philadelphia. His experience also happened around the same time I was having my nightmares as a kid in the late 80s. He was describing how gray aliens had come into his room when he was a child, and he had also been having nightmares about insect-like creatures. He also talked about his closet and how as a kid he thought that's where they were coming from. It sounded so much like my experience, and after hearing him talk about it, something in my mind opened up. It was so startling that I almost had to pull the car over, but that night I started getting memories and actual visual images in my mind of the experiences I had when I was a kid. I remembered lying in my little twin bed and not being able to move. I also remembered looking up through the thin screen windows of my bed tent and seeing what we call gray aliens today. I know there were 3 of them in total, but 2 were beside my bed while the 3rd was toward the back of the room. I feel like the 2 beside me were communicating with the 3rd one and almost taking orders from it. It felt like it was their superior in some way, but I don't know how to explain it. There was also an incredibly bright light coming from my closet, which I found so strange because it wasn't a closet you could walk into. It was the kind of closet where as soon as you opened the door, it was shelves. I don't have any memories of them actually doing anything to me, but again, I felt paralyzed and might not have known. I could only look around with my eyes and see their heads and upper bodies. I think describing them as bugs to my parents was my way of explaining what they looked like, and I vaguely remember relating them to ants. I had one other possibly related encounter later in life when I went to a UFO convention. While I was there, an older woman came up to me out of the blue and said they're interested in you and they mean you no harm, which I thought was weird. I asked her what she meant by that, and she told me it was because I have red hair and blue eyes, which is a rare combination and makes me special. She was very nice and maybe just wanted to talk to me, but I thought it was an odd thing to randomly tell someone you don't know. Some people have told me to try hypnosis, but if I'm being honest, I'm afraid of remembering more. I already have a hard time knowing what I know, and it still haunts me even in my 40s. I have a younger brother and sister that are a few years behind me, but they weren't really old enough to know anything about my experience when it happened. I have noticed, though, that we all seem to have issues with sleep, and that makes me wonder if either of them had anything similar happen. I've thought about asking them if they remember anything happening when we were growing up, but I don't want to stir up any negative memories like I've had to deal with. In the end, I don't think what I went through was me dreaming. I feel very sure of that, actually. It's a totally different feeling from remembering nightmares, and this isn't the same. Hopefully, whatever they wanted is over now, but I'd be lying if I said I still don't feel like I'm being watched. Maybe in the future I'll get the courage to try hypnosis, but for now, I mostly wish these memories would go away. This is my dad's story, and it took place in the summer of 1982 when he was stationed at a military base in New Brunswick, Canada. I've heard the whole thing a few times over the years, and every time he tells it, he gets a look on his face like he wishes he could forget it. This is exactly how he tells it. One night, my dad's best friend was taking a girlfriend out to see the movie Tron. It had just come out, and everyone on the base was talking about it. Since there wasn't a theater anywhere near the base, they had a long drive to get to the nearest one, which my dad says was over an hour one way. After they left, he went back inside the barracks to hang out with some of the other guys for the rest of the night. Not even an hour later, my dad heard the sound of their car pulling up outside the barracks. Slightly concerned, he went to the window and saw that it was definitely them, and right away he knew something was wrong. His friend's car was beat up like they'd been in an accident. The whole front and side of it, including both side doors, were scraped and dented, and there were areas with streaks of different colors, like multiple cars had collided with them and left some of their paint behind. My dad ran outside to see what happened, and when his friend and the girl got out of the car, he said it looked like they were both completely in shock. After trying to ask them what had happened and if anybody was injured, they barely said a word and went straight inside. His girlfriend grabbed her stuff, got in her car and left, while my dad's friend went straight to bed. My dad didn't push anything, but said his friend made it clear that he didn't want to talk about it, which was so out of character for him. Finally, 2 days after this happened, he managed to get the story, and this is what his friend told him. Apparently, on their way to the theater but still far outside of town, they were driving along a stretch of the road where there was really nothing around aside from other cars. Just trees and hills and the road. As they were coming around a long curve, they saw a huge cluster of the strangest multicolored lights you can imagine, and they were lifting up from behind the hill they were driving toward. His friend said the most shocking part of seeing this was how stark and obvious the lights were against the pitch-dark sky. There are no towns or buildings or homes for miles, and there shouldn't have been lights like that coming from anywhere. He said he slowed down to a crawl and could see that this object was moving over the road about the same height as the top of the hill, and it was covered in pulsing colors. He told my dad that this had to be visible to anyone for miles. Right after the curve in the road, there happened to be a parking lot and a campground with a narrow entrance that only one car could fit through at a time. When they got to it, they saw several other cars pulling into the parking lot and stopping, and he could see other people getting out to watch this thing. Being just as curious as everybody else, he figured they should stop too, so he pulled in. They parked the car and got out with the rest of the people who were milling around in awe trying to figure out what was in the sky. They were just about to walk toward a trail that went up the side of the hill where other people were going to get a better view when something happened that made every single person panic at the same time. My dad's friend said that this object rose straight up above the peak of the hill, giving everyone in the parking lot a crystal clear view of the underside of it. I guess the part they could see had an unbelievable amount of colors on it. Then it made this horrendous sound that vibrated deep into his chest and almost knocked them off their feet. He described it as the single most terrifying and loud sound he had ever heard, and it caused everyone around them to lose it. People were screaming and running back to their cars. Then, like panicked animals, everybody tried to leave the parking lot at the same time. Because the entrance was so narrow, cars were smashing into each other trying to get out. As they tried to leave, his car was bumping fenders and scraping along the sides of other cars. I guess it was total chaos with yelling and honking and everyone doing whatever they could to get away from what was happening. My dad's friend finally managed to squeeze his way out, then drove straight back to the base as fast as he could. He told my dad that he didn't even remember the drive. He only remembered his girlfriend crying hysterically next to him. They didn't stop until they were back on the base, and that was when they pulled into the barracks when my dad saw them. I guess that following weekend he ended up taking my dad and another guy back out to where it had happened. My dad told me he didn't really believe the UFO part of the story, or at least not completely, but when they got to the narrow driveway and campground parking lot, it was still a total mess and you could absolutely see that something crazy had happened. There was even an entire bumper left on the ground and my dad didn't know what to make of it. Very shortly after the three of them had gone out there, two men in suits showed up at the barracks. My dad says that these guys did not look like military. They didn't look like law enforcement either, or anyone else he had ever seen or encountered on the base. The two men walked around like they owned the place, pulling specific people out, including my dad and his friend. Both of them were taken into a room and talked to privately, then sent away without any kind of explanation. My dad was only questioned about driving out to the campground, then they released him. His friend was treated much differently though. Later, when they were able to talk about it, his friend said that the two men were incredibly aggressive and violent with him. I won't repeat the language they used, but basically, they threatened his life. He was told that if he ever talked about what he saw, getting kicked out of the military would be the least of his worries. That was all he said, and my dad could tell he was genuinely scared. The year after this went down, my dad was posted to Newfoundland, which is where we live now. After everything happened, his friend became distant and strange, and eventually the two of them stopped talking altogether. It wasn't just with my dad either. I guess he shut out everyone around him, and my dad hasn't talked to him since the day he left the base. Because of that, he really has no way of knowing whatever happened to the guy or how he's doing. My dad still can't explain what his friend saw, but whatever it was, other people obviously saw it too, and most of the witnesses had nothing to do with the military. He doesn't for a minute think it was extraterrestrial, but he does know for sure that someone didn't want them talking about it. I want to thank everyone for watching another episode of Skywatcher Stories. If you like hearing these personal experiences of strange sightings and alien encounters, please subscribe because I upload new episodes every week and it really helps the channel. Until next time, keep watching the skies.